Hello there, and welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast with Callum and Johnny. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Callum.
And this week, we have a very special Christmas episode to listen to.
Yes, this week we're doing alternative Christmas movies. So everybody has one of these. For most people, it's the safe choice, which is Die Hard. But this is the point when you've had enough of Love Actually. You've had enough of the forced merriment and the jingle bells and the mince pies.
And Batman Smells.
And Robin Laid an Egg. And you want films that are either a little bit more intelligent, maybe a bit darker, maybe just a bit more fun. You know, you find yourself getting bored of the soundtracks with the ching, ching, ching and Santa Claus or whoever and people hugging and learning, and you want something that's a little bit darker, a little bit more interesting, something that you could watch any time of the year, but for some reason you've adopted it as your Christmas film of choice.
Yeah, and this week we are actually it's not suspending a rule, I suppose. One is older and one is newer, but we're not having a new movie because, well, as far as my knowledge goes, there's not any new movies out this year that could be counted as maybe an alternative Christmas movie.
There is that film where David Harbour plays Santa Claus, he beats people up, but I still
think that's quite Christmas in your face. It's a Christmas movie.
I think so
not
too.
A film that. I think the definition is there are movies that are about Christmassy things that are at Christmas, which that is just
but slightly more cheeky.
And then there are things that are just happen to be at Christmas. So, like Die Hard, there's a Christmas party. It's at Christmas. There's a little bit of people singing jingle bells or whatever in it, but it's not really like a Christmas movie. You wouldn't think that at least 50% of the theme is about Christmas.
And I think that's the point. It's something that you personally adopt rather than have something forced at you. It's a Christmas movie, except this one, like Bad Santa or this new David Harbour film, is a bit cheekier, so you're going to like it. That's not the same thing. It might be a bit cheekier, it might be a bit funner, it might be a bit more violent even, but it's not quite the same thing because these are films that you pull close to your heart. It's a different thing.
I would also possibly argue that there are some movies like Dam Busters or things that are kind of always shown at Christmas, even though there's nothing to do with Christmas, and even them would be borderline what we're talking about today. But
yes, I think so too.
Both films we've talked about have got a mention of Christmas here or there, whether it be in set design or seasonality,
or when they're set and things like that.
So that is what today's episode will be about. Very quick shout out to everyone to please like and subscribe to us on Spotify, iTunes, whatever. Get that download done every week. And also, while you're at it, why don't you go onto our Instagram and Facebook and follow us, where we have lots of exciting social media things that we post on there that you can interact with us, and we might mention your name on the podcast.
Lots of fun to be had there. And that's Untitled Film Podcast, all one word, Facebook and Instagram. And Twitter, who cares?
Yeah, fuck that place.
Fuck it.
But yeah, anyway. So that is that this week. Then first main segment of our podcast that we usually like to have every week is the news. And Callum.
No. No?
No.
Oh.
Do you know what's funny? Emily Maitlis and John Soper must listen to us because they have a new podcast called News Agents. And on said podcast, they started up a new thing where it was like a review of the year. And Emily Maitlis every time started singing the final countdown, and John Soper's not allowing her to do it anymore.
Where is that familiar?
Well, exactly.
Being shut down by my co-host.
Being controlled
by the one
from
who
making
does
the
most work, it must be said.
Mistake of his life.
I mean, I am a contributor rather than the kind of main showrunner here.
Yeah, if you say so. Anyway, so what is your first piece of news, Callum? Was what I was going to ask you before you rudely interrupted my flow.
And got all the fluff in the way. Well, there's a interesting adaptation of a book called Queer by the author William S. Burroughs. It's going to be directed by Luca Guadagnino. It's a bit of a tough name. It's an Italian name. He, if you're familiar at all, he directed Call Me By Your Name, and most recently the film that just came out, Bones and All, which has had pretty good reviews. I have to say I'm a bit agnostic on him. I saw Call You By Your Name and I thought, I get why a lot of people are really adopting it, but personally for me, it was a 3 out of 5. I didn't quite settle for me. And the same with his remake of Suspiria. I admired it, but didn't really like it. But this is going to star Daniel Craig, and it's a very important text for LGBT readers. It's one of quite early texts during the sort of beat poetry when people were starting to get more fluid and open about that sort of thing. And it follows Daniel Craig's character as he follows someone who is discharged from a naval base that he takes a fancy to. And I'm looking forward to it because I like Daniel Craig's post-Bond run. He looks like he's just having a blast, not having to do those stunts anymore. And he seems to be entering his post-Bond character actor stage. And I'm looking for this. Looks like it's going to be another entry into that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of it.
Interesting enough, that was a piece of news that I nearly picked.
Ooh, really?
But I skimmed over it for a couple of others. One, because I thought it might start an interesting wider discussion. So yeah, interesting, definitely something to look forward to. And I too am enjoying Daniel Craig at the moment.
Yes,
I still haven't seen Glass Onion because it's not out for another few days on Netflix.
I saw it during its
Cineplex.
very brief cinema run. And you're going to like it.
Good. And so my first piece of news this week is that apparently Wonder Woman 3 is on hold at DC Studios.
I heard that.
Interesting news there. I wonder how much of it's to do with kind of James Gunn taking over, if it was something that was already in the offing. But, so this is what I thought it might open up a wider discussion. What is going on with the DC universe? Other than that James Gunn has taken over.
I know that James Gunn, and it's not just James Gunn, I can't remember the name of the other guy, so it's him and one other person. And they seem to be cleaning house a bit. They seem to be pick and choosing what they like. So James Gunn...
I almost mean this in a broader sense, though. So, obviously, DC seems to have kind of split into two factions. So you've got the faction that is partly to do with the... What should we call it? The Schneiderverse, which Wonder Woman was kind of part of that.
Yes.
The Batman involving... not the Batman, the movies starring Batman involving Ben Affleck, the Henry Cavill Superman, that kind of branch. And then there was another kind of branch that kind of like had Shazam, and then the second Suicide Squad, because the first Suicide Squad's kind of in the first bit. Then you've had Black Adam. I would argue the Joker and the new Batman, they seem to be more on that kind of... Even though they may not inhabit quite the same universe even, they kind of have the same feeling. And it's kind of branched off into these... And then obviously you've got the Peacemaker TV series from that, and it's kind of branched off into all these different things that don't really fit together anymore.
I'm not sure if they really have a proper plan in place, or at least didn't. Now that we have James Gunn, it might be changing. But of course, changes take time just because they've only just been reinstated, these two guys, James and the other guy. So it's not going to be immediate until we see how their changes are. But it's funny, how are you with spoiling Black Adam?
Well, I haven't seen it, so I'd rather you didn't.
Okay.
And also, I don't think we should spoil it on the podcast.
Yeah, because there was something, because you mentioned about two branches, and there is something that if I spoil Black Adam, it kind of goes into a deeper...
Does it start to connect back into to the Snyder branch?
It does.
Interesting. I kind of visually thought that might be the case, but then what's going on with... So I watched The Batman for the first time of the day. Yeah, I know, late to the party for someone who is on a film podcast, but finally got around to seeing it. And again, I couldn't quite see where that fit in the universe, because at one point that movie was going to have Ben Affleck in.
Yes.
And then he obviously kind of like dropped... Well, at one point, Ben Affleck was going to direct it and star in it. And then, but then he was just going to star in it. And then he wasn't going to star in it anymore. And then it was this new thing. And then, but there's a Joker in that as well. I mean, this is... Yeah, I mean, that's a spoiler, but there is a... he's not really in it, but it's not really that big a spoiler, is it? But there's a scene where it's hinted that there will be a Joker in the future. And it's like... But why didn't you just use the Joaquin Phoenix Joker? Like, I realise that maybe you don't care about having it as a interconnecting universe, but clearly on some level they do. Hence why they brought James Gunn and stuff in.
It is a bit of a mess,
and it's just like, well, what's been going on? And I realise, okay, they're cleaning house and stuff now, and they've brought people in to do that. But why did it get to this stage? And why did it get to... And ironically, the interesting parts of... what they've done in recent years have been these kind of standalone movies.
Oh, absolutely.
The ones that kind of really well and connect into the universe, and some like the standalone animated projects, like Harley
Quinn.
Harley Quinn has been great, and this is where they obviously do care about having an interconnected universe. The Suicide Squad and Suicide Squad are both kind of connected together.
Yes.
But then they're connected by the Harley Quinn movie.
Yes.
And they're all connected to the Snyderverse.
Yes, because there's a cameo from Ben Affleck in the first film.
And then obviously the Joker is in the extended cut of the Snyder cut of, what's it called? Justice League.
Yes, Justice League.
But they don't feel tonally like they fit in with that. They tonally feel like they fit more in with the Batman and Shazam and that kind of thing. But
it almost seems like they care about individual projects and then occasionally go, oh, wouldn't it be fun if... But
clearly watching the Batman, that is a movie that has been designed to set up a universe.
Their own thing, their own
characters in
thing.
that. Yeah, I mean, we're not reviewing it today, but there are characters within that. But we are, hint, hint, interviewing a Batman. But there are characters in that don't really fit in with the rest of
like how the Penguin sort of doesn't have much to do.
Yeah,
but it's only a way to set up his own TV
character.
show.
Yeah, his TV show, which is that he's also, I assume, going to be the new movie. The main bad guy by far in it is the Riddler. And then it's obviously setting up Arkham and the idea that there's people in Arkham and other things are mentioned. And it's just like, what are they doing? Like, surely there would be some meeting.
So some consistency.
Yeah, or at least like, okay, we're going to have the dark DC branch and we're going to have the main DC branch, and the dark branch are going to be R-rated movies that have a $120 million budget, and the other ones are going to have $200 million, are going to be for the whole family. But then have the dark, but at least connect the Joker with the I don't envy James Gunn's job. He's really swooped into.
I can see the cogs in your brain kind of overpowering and steam pouring out of your ears
because,
as you're trying to connect the dots.
If I'd been in charge, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, no, that's true. That probably is true.
And let's be honest, Wonder Woman... 1984 is a bit boring, but Wonder Woman is not the issue with the
absolutely
universe.
not. It was actually one of the
best
few bright spots in that part.
So why is that the one? And so I think that's taking it back to the initial point before I went on this big rant.
They can shit-can Ben Affleck for all they're like.
Well, he has been shit-canned, hasn't he?
Well, I don't think they ever quite quit on him, because I think he has a cameo.
Didn't he quit on it, though?
He may have done. I think he has a cameo left in The Flash.
Yeah, but how long's that been in the tank for?
Well, quite.
And how long will that ever see the light of day?
With Ezra Miller on their crime spree.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all very problematic for DC.
Yes.
And I wish James Gunn luck, because from a comic book point of view, fuck Marvel, DC are the one. I much prefer them.
And when they do strike at something, even if it doesn't quite work, it's certainly more interesting, and it actually feels like a movie.
Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, obviously, Kevin Feige and stuff have done an amazing job of digging deep and opening the cupboard of
and turning
unknown...
something like Guardians of the Galaxy into a mega billion,
or even Iron Man
hit maker. Oh yeah.
Like, who would have thought? I mean, Iron Man, people knew who he was, but who would have thought Iron Man was going to spawn 3 movies that gross best part of $3 billion?
The figurehead.
Yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, people knew who Captain America was. And obviously everyone knew who Spider-Man was. But they didn't even have Spider-Man at the start, and they kind of don't now. So it's like, fair play to them. They didn't have probably their single biggest asset, and they managed to build a massive empire out of that. And DC, who had Batman and Superman, like the 2 heroes, the Caped Crusaders, and then throw in Wonder Woman and stuff, and you've got like quite a big set of like big heroes, and nada. Like, they've obviously made a bit of money out of it overall, probably, but for every movie they've made money on, they've had another absolute stinker that's lost a lot of money.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah.
And even films that made money, like the first Suicide Squad, they didn't want to repeat that.
No, exactly. It's like, well, we made $700 million, but it was a steaming pile of shit. Yeah. So, DC, get your shit together.
Yes, that was very much like in Always Sunny when Pepe Sylvia. Never seen you get so worked up.
Wow. I've been thinking about this since I watched The Batman, which has its problems, but is a reasonable enough movie.
It's a movie.
And
first off, which is something.
Yeah.
But it's not the place and time to rant about Marvel.
Well, yeah. That's for another day.
It is indeed.
Anyway.
Should I do my second piece of news?
You can do your second piece of news.
So Mean Girls, the musical, is going to be set up at Paramount, and they've cast several of the lead roles. Angoria Rice from The Nice Guys. She was Ryan Gosling's daughter in The Nice Guys. Is going to be playing the lead. And in supporting roles, we have Renee Rapp. Aluya Cravalho from Moana is going to be playing one of the characters. And Jaquel Spivey is going to be rounding out that cast. And we are getting into a ridiculous sort of remaking the remake of the thing of the thing of the thing. Because, of course, the movie led to the Broadway musical, which led to this second movie based on the Broadway musical, and this is happening again with Matilda, which was an adaptation and then became a musical, and now we're getting the film of the musical, and it is starting to get a bit ridiculous. I'm a bit sick of it, if I'm being honest. So to be honest, I couldn't really care that much about Mean Girls. I just wanted to kind of bring this up as a point for me to rant about my own thing.
Who wants new ideas? Who wants something original?
Clearly.
Like, I've just started watching Wednesday on Netflix. It's perfectly good, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's probably one of the best things Tim Burton's done for a while from the couple of episodes I've seen. But did it need to be remade? How many versions of the Addams Family are there?
We are really just digging into just IP graves.
Yeah.
Pulling out what we can. Like, Banana Man. Let's make a film of Banana Man.
What happened to original ideas, and some of these things are so, like, obviously the Addams Family, they've made loads of them and they always make money, and people, young girls like Wednesday Addams and stuff.
It's very much kind of goth chic, isn't it?
Yeah, and I understand why they've done that, but some of the stuff that they dig out of these old, like,
get the dust off.
Oh yeah, we've got this thing in the cupboard, and people are like, what's that? Never heard of it. Like, the amount of things that enough people have just dug them out of a cupboard and gone, that's a piece of IP, or that'll do. You might as well just had an original idea.
Well, at that point,
there's
exactly.
no built-in
audience.
Unless you've got something, really amazing to say. I mean, I know it's not digging out an old piece of IP, but I feel like the Emoji Movie is the perfect example of this. Oh, we have some IP. It's emojis. Let's make a movie out of it. Yeah, because that's a good idea. And then let's get James Corden, the world's least popular human being that somehow people liked for about a week, and we'll put him as the main character. James fucking Corden. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, it is getting really, really ridiculous. Unless you can do something funny and ironic with it, like the Lego Movie, then,
that's
getting to a point like, what's the point? And even that wasn't a guarantee. They just happened to hire two directors who had a previous hit. And I imagine the studio just went, here's a bunch of money. You've done, you've made a film, successful studio films. Bring it on time, bring it on budget, and do whatever you want. And they did do whatever they want.
In fairness to the Lego Movie, what I liked about it was it is stop motion using Lego, and I thought that's an interesting use of.
Well, it's not actually stop motion.
Some of it is.
No, it's CGI really? Made to look like stop motion.
See, I googled this at the time because I assumed it was that, and I saw like bits of the making bits of it with actual Lego.
It might be because there are scenes towards the end, of course, spoilers for the Lego movie with
when they're cutting between
Ferrell.
the two. But I still think I saw them actually doing it on some scenes.
Maybe the little tiny bit during those scenes when hands
obviously
are kind of
there's a lot of CGI in those, even if not all of it is stop. Right, there's a big chunk of it was always going to be. But anyway, it works as a concept that even if you're.
And it is getting to the stage now where even for very smart directors, it seems like they can't graduate from making indie movies to their own personal studio films until they've done a big studio film.
Mushed through the factory, yeah.
Exactly. So Taika Waititi has to make a few Thors before he can make a $30 million thing like Jojo Rabbit. And Ryan Johnson can't make his films without making kind of one of the more interesting Star Wars movies. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's the wrong thing you've just said, but the worst of the new Star Wars movies, yeah.
What, worse than Rise of Skywalker?
Good question.
It really is.
Them both.
It's fine to dislike it, but it's certainly more interesting. I didn't say good, I said interesting.
I'll let you have interesting. Yeah, because Rise of Skywalker is basically fan art, or fan fiction. But
exactly.
But I'm not a particularly smart fan.
Well, quite.
Anyway, I feel, once again
we're drifting off topic. Yes.
I'm going to lift this joke that I'm going to do to announce this piece of news right off of Empire because I like the joke. So credit to Empire here. It's her. Hi. She's the director. It's her. Do you know what I could be referring to?
Taylor Swift going into directing.
She is. Taylor Swift is going to direct her feature debut, and it will be for Fox Searchlight Pictures. Are they still Fox? Anyway, Searchlight. It's just Searchlight. I just assume it's Fox Searchlight because that's what it used to be. So it will be an indie project of some variety. They haven't announced what yet, though. No plot or potential casting details have been released just yet. Just that it's based on an original script, also written by her, and that she's going to direct it.
It could be potentially good. I mean, she is, of course, very talented. Very talented. You know, her last 4 albums have all been sort of mega smash critical and audience darlings. But of course, you never know when people decide, an actor decides to go into directing. For every Kevin Costner or Ben Affleck, you get someone who isn't that. And for every singer who decides that they're going to do X, Y, and Z other artistic thing, there are some who are really good.
Yeah,
and there are some who are really poor. So, you know, that's potentially very interesting.
On another note, though, the 2 movies she's been in previously are Amsterdam by David O. Russell and Cats by Tom Hooper, both of which obviously did really well at the box office, and people talk about
Smash
them
hits.
really positively. But let's hope Swift's own project can shape... I fucked up the sponge line.
Tisk, tisk.
Let's hope that Swift's own project can shake the reputation off. Get it? Shake
this is
it
awful.
off. Shake it off. Get it? This is also stolen from Empire.
This is where journalism comes to die. And they say print journalism is dead.
Well, this isn't print, is it?
No, it's not.
So maybe we refer... Well,
it could also be in the magazine.
I've stolen it from print journalism if you call the internet print, which I...
No, I wouldn't. It's digital. Unless it's also... It could be both.
If it's depends if it's a magazine or not, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, on that very truncated bombshell, I think we should go into talking about movies.
Yes.
So we've decided to go in movie order.
Do you mean release order?
Release order. Yeah. Well, movie release is what I was going to say.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Because neither film are particularly new. So I will go first with my movie.
Absolutely, go for it.
Which, if you hadn't, I don't know if we said this actually, we've each picked a movie.
Yes.
So my movie is Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, starring David Bowie and Riichi, I'm going to say this name wrong, I'm sure, but Riichi Yamamoto, who is a Japanese musician by trade, pianist, who also wrote the score for the movie. And it's kind of like casting and direction and money and everything. It's kind of like a co-production between British production companies and Japanese production companies. But the main reason I love it is Mr. David Bowie. Bowie.
Let's call the whole thing
exactly.
off.
Who, I'm still, I'm one of his biggest fans in the history of the world. I still am not sure. Because I'm swear I've seen him in an interview saying it's David Bowie. No, Bowie. But his son was called Zowie, so Zowie Bowie. So so anyway, I still can't, I'm still not convinced I know which way to say it is correct. I think it's Bowie, but I don't know. Anyway.
For the sake of consistency, I think let's stick with that. Bowie.
I'm sure I'll change anyway. So, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is about a POW camp in the Second World War in Indonesia, I believe. Although which country it's in isn't necessarily the most important part of the story. I believe it's in Java. Anyway, and David Bowie, he's a major. He's not called Major David Bowie, but I can't remember what he's called. Very good journalism here.
I could certainly get up IMDb.
Don't worry about it. I don't think it really matters. And he is arrested and hauled up in front of a trial. And in said trial, they say that the crimes that he has committed should sentence him to death. But they're going to have a little think about it. So in the meantime, they put him in an internment camp where he meets Mr. Lawrence, along with Riichi Yamamoto's, I don't know, he's not a guard. What would you call it? What's the head of a camp?
Sort of like a general or a... like the person who runs it, anyway.
Yeah, like who's called, I believe, Ayoko, and he is, again, I'm not very good with names, hence why I'm calling David Bowie's character and things. And he befriends some people, he annoys some people, and he is in this camp until what happens to him. And that is what I'll go with for the description at this point, not to give too much away.
Well, I think in a way that's quite good.
Yeah. So what did you think, Callum?
Honestly, it took me a little bit to get into it, like the first 20 minutes, because there's something about the production which I found a little bit stiff and almost stagey. I did wonder for a while if it was based on a stage play, because it seemed to have all the trappings. Very, scenes happening in rooms, long conversations. And for a little bit, there was something about it that I wasn't quite settling into it. I could admire the acting. David Bowie had a sort of
Bowie
had a movie star charisma. And even though this is one of his earliest roles, he had been on Broadway at this point. He'd been in The Elephant Man, and that's actually what got him the part. And he was also in The Man Who Fell to Earth. But at the moment, he was still kind of quite new to acting, but he has a instant magnetism. And I could admire that. Tom Conti as Mr. Lawrence he's excellent. He has a very world-weary sort of thing to him. But there was something about the stiffness in the production, and the editing was quite long. It had very long takes, and perhaps it's just something I'm not used to. But for a little bit, I wasn't really settling into it. But then the drama started to get to me, and I started to really care what was happening in these relationships between both the Japanese characters and the English characters, and how they spoke to each other, and how each individuals had their own set of rules and guidelines, and how they behave around one another. The interplay of all these different people really started to come alive, and I really started to get soaked in to the drama of it all. And I think it's one of those films, actually I think that's going to be something, because we haven't said what the second movie is, there's going to be some crossover, because in terms of production, both have a little bit of, I guess, awkwardness is the best word.
Interesting enough, that's what I thought when I was watching the other movie we talk about as well.
There's a little bit of an awkwardness to the staging and to the editing and everything about it, and just a little bit, it doesn't quite click. But then with this film, I thought by the last kind of hour to 40 minutes, I was completely engrossed. And because both of these movies are old, we can spoil them. As it goes into the childhoods of both Mr. Lawrence and David Bowie's character, I think we've already broken that rule where Bowie.
Yeah, definitely.
Up until the point where you see flashbacks of David Bowie's story and why he is the way he is, because he's sort of a rule breaker. He's an agitator. He's belligerent. So when he's in this camp, this POW camp, he absolutely does not follow the rules, and he takes every chance, almost with a teenager sort of gleefulness to him. And for a while you think, this guy's a bit of a knob, actually. I mean, I get it, but
I think if I was in an internment camp and the people were being particularly nasty to me, I think I would maybe struggle to bite my tongue. But there you go.
Well, quite. But then it goes back into his story, into his background, and you see why he literally ran from his school years, where he did something quite shameful that he's embarrassed about, and he's trying to kind of make up for this thing. So he still has, even though he's a man who's fought in the war for several years now, he has this childlike energy to him, because that's sort of where his life stopped developing in terms of how it would usually go before war completely interrupted that. And because of this moment of shame, and even though we can spoil it, I don't want to spoil it too much, because I would like people to see it. And by that point, I was completely engrossed, and anything that was stiff or awkward about the production, all had been forgiven. It's I think with both films, but certainly with this one, it's a case of wow them in the end, and you got a hit. And it really did. It really, really won me over. And I'm expecting that, because this is your personal movie, that's very much true for you.
Yeah, I think I love it. I think David Bowie in it's amazing. Tom Conti in it's amazing. Michi Sakamoto in it is amazing. I think it really, it works very well. It tells a very difficult story and a very difficult thing. Internment camps were not great, let's be honest. Or is it, or prisoner or POW camps were not great, particularly ones run by the Japanese in Southeast Asia. I've been to the death railway in Burma, and I've seen what happened to a lot of the POWs there. So yeah, not a great situation. And I think it brought a real level of humanity to it. I think it brought a humanity to the prisoners, but also the guards, and that's something difficult that Riichi Sakamoto does really well. He manages to what's the word I'm looking for? He manages to really encompass like the fragility of humanity and why people may do evil things. What are their reasons, and also I think it does a good job of talking about the. I don't want to get too much into how different cultures operate, but I think Western cultures tend to be more individualist, whereas Asian, and again, it's different country to country, but particularly Japan and China and some Asian countries tend to be more, or I should say South Asian and Southeast Asian and things, but tend to be more collectivist as countries. And I think it kind of explores that quite interestingly, and things which, is interesting to see. But I do think it has problems. I think for me, one of the biggest issues is the editing. I think it's almost quite disorientating. So let me give a really good example. I think that so one thing actually about the film is the proper version, there are two versions, but the proper version doesn't have subtitles. So obviously there's a lot of characters speaking Japanese a lot of the film. And the idea is and vice versa. So the idea is if you're Japanese and you're watching it, you don't really know what's going on with the Brits. You might do if you can speak two languages, but a lot of people would watch it and go, what are they doing? What are their plans? What are they thinking? And kind of like feeling it around. And it's the reverse for, if you're watching it from an English speaking point of view, you're watching it and going, what are they saying? What are their plans? What's going to happen to these people? Have they just sentenced them to death? Have they just said, well, let him off this? What's been going on? So it's disorientating. But then I think when you add that there's sometimes quite big jumps in the story. And again, I don't like things that spoon feed you stuff. But it kind of like, you'll have a scene where someone's getting told off, and then it'll kind of cut, and then someone else is going to go in and stab someone, and you're like, oh, how do these kind of connect? And then as it starts to go, and you're like, oh, okay, they're being punished. And that stabbing's nothing to do with the punishment. But it kind of maybe doesn't kind of feel like it lines up that well. And I think if you didn't have this disorientatiness of the language, maybe you would notice it, but it's like double levels of disorientation. So I think that is my biggest kind of downside of it, is it can be quite disorientating if you don't speak both English and Japanese. But other than that, I think, I really like it. I actually I know what you mean by it kind of feeling stagey, and that it kind of almost feels like they've used this set for quite a while. They don't exactly move the cameras around in many interesting ways or anything. But actually, I would like to say the lighting, I think, in some scenes is fantastic. There's some scenes at night in the kind of bunk houses and things where you've got red lights from one direction and blue lights from another, and that all works really well. And the other thing I would say is the set design is fantastic. I was reading about it actually, and apparently they built, so it was filmed on Rarotonga, which is a little Polynesian island, and when they built the set on there, apparently they built a whole POW camp, and they only used like 30 or 40% of it when they were filming.
And David Bowie's kind of saying, you're using it, it's such a waste. You're only shooting these tight corners. And then when he saw the film, he's like, oh, I get it. I think, production-wise, there are a few minor flaws, like you mentioned the editing, I mentioned some of the staginess. I think some of the more impressive cinematography comes later on at night, because at the first... Again, it's all in the first kind of 20, 30 minutes where I wasn't quite sure about it. It's daytime sets. And the thing about shooting a film in daytime is, even with the best equipment in the world, it can sometimes look slightly televisual if there's not much going on. And I did find myself thinking, is this a TV movie, like a really well-respected TV movie, like Roots? Or because in the early to mid 80s, that's when television was starting to take its first stabs at being taken seriously, and you got things like Roots and other TV miniseries and TV movies. And for the first 20 minutes, I thought, had I got this wrong? Was this a TV movie? But as it went along, I could see that, firstly, how huge that set was, and the breadth of the production design and the cinematography, and the fact that they get performers of this quality. David Bowie's not signing up for a TV movie. Tom Conti's not signing up, at least not at this point, for a TV movie. Also, I want to make a special mention to a performer we haven't mentioned yet, who is now a cult figure, but at the time, I think was just sort of a straight actor. He now goes by the name Beat Takeshi. And he's sort of a director, writer of B movies, and he stars in B movies. But at the time, he was sort of more of a jobbing character actor, and at the time just went by the name Takeshi. And for a while, I was thinking, is that? No, I couldn't quite recognize him. Is that Beat? Throughout the whole film, I was like, I recognize him. His name's just Takeshi. Is that Beat Takeshi, the star and director of Violent Cop and the Violent Cop franchise,
and Takeshi's Castle?
Is that bloody hell? It is Beat Takeshi. And that was a nice thing. I like Beat Takeshi.
And he does say the immortal words, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
And he's very good in it. He probably is an early example of the humanity of the guards, because he has somewhat of a friendship with Mr. Lawrence, even though he still has to be an enforcer, and at times he does a lot of the abuse with the nightstick and breaks things and bodies. But he has this kind of, he wakes him up at night and they have a bit of a chat several times, and they have. So he is a sort of early example of that sort of fine line. So he might be the best example, because the other guy is so rigid up until, because we know that he must eventually break down. And of course, I don't want to spoil it too much, but there is a reason why this ending is iconic.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something else I found was quite an interesting tidbit, is that the director was Japanese, Nagishi Oshima, I believe is how you say his name, and he apparently didn't give a huge amount of direction to the British actors and gave like really in-depth direction to the Japanese actors. And I think what he wanted to do was highlight the kind of differences in how he basically would say to the Tom Conti and Bowie and stuff, do what you would do. What would you think you would do in this scenario? How do you think you'd act? How do you think, and wanted them to do that? Whereas, because he he didn't think that from, he would be able to give them the right stage directions to act in the way that they think somebody that would act in that scenario, and vice versa, which I thought was quite a nice touch as well. The other thing that neither of us really have talked about in detail yet is the amazing soundtrack.
Yes.
So again, as I said, Richie Sakamoto, he composed and wrote the majority of the score for it, as well as acting as one of the lead actors. And yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And if you don't know it, and I suspect a lot of you probably don't, there is an iconic song from it by him, which is Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. And I think the chances are, if you haven't seen the film, you will have heard that song before. If I give you, in fact, I was talking to it about someone the other day, and they said they hadn't heard it, and I went do 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 do, and they went, oh yeah, I know that song. So it's been in loads of things over the years, but this is the film that song is from, and it's the kind of the main theme song and stuff for it. And yeah, I think it do you know the film it kind of reminds me of the most, which in some ways is a better movie, but I still really enjoy them both, is The Killing Fields. It's got that kind of, it feels very similar kind of time production.
I believe they both came out in the same year.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. They've got that. They feel very similar. And they've both got quite interesting soundtracks by interesting people. Of course, it was Mike Oldfield, who did Tubular Bells, did the soundtrack for The Killing Fields. Both about quite incredibly dark, horrible kind of bits of history, and both doing it in quite a subtle human way. I think that they kind of, there's a big overlap between those two as well in my head, and they're both films that I really enjoy and see fondly, although I don't see The Killing Fields as a Christmas movie.
No, not at all.
Whereas this is.
Please do not watch The Killing Fields this Christmas.
No, my advice is watch it in maybe watch it in February.
Yes.
Or when spring appears and you're feeling in a better mood. Yeah. So, what's your sum up of the movie?
I thought it was, after it took me a little while to get into it, and after I began to forgive some of the more basically nitpicking, really, get over those nitpicks. I thought it was excellent, very human war movie, very character-based, gave David Bowie one of his first star-making performances.
He's a star man!
See, he criticizes me when I sing. But anyway, Sour Grapes. Very well acted and very, very interesting human drama. And I completely understand why someone would make this their Christmas film, despite its darkness.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways there is a level of upliftingness and hope at the end.
Yes, very
maybe,
human.
Because it is human, I think,
yeah.
and that's it. And even though people as a whole do bad things, humans maybe individually, and for the most part, aren't bad things, and I think it shows that quite well.
Yes.
No, I agree. I think again, yeah, it's a little bit flawed, and some of it's the time of, if you look back at early '80s movies, a lot of them were a bit disjointed. Felt I don't want to say all movies because there was definitely some out there that did, but the majority, I don't think they quite had the level of storytelling that people got rolling with in the mid '90s onwards, and they didn't, they were a bit rough around the edges and weren't as slick, and I think that's where some of it comes from. But no, it is a great movie. Well, we'll give it a score later, but it's pretty good. And on to our second movie. What have you picked for us, Callum?
Well, this is my personal...
Oh, actually, we should stop for an advert break.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're now back from that little nice break there. And Callum, what did you pick as your movie of the Christmas
like yours, this is a very personal movie. It's, as with alternative Christmas movies, they're sort of adopted choices. And mine would be Tim Burton's Batman Returns, the sequel to his Batman film, which at the time in 1989 was the most successful film of all time. So, of course, it was a no-brainer for Warner Brothers to give Tim Burton all of the money in the world to make his second film. But with the difference, because with the first film, he was slightly pushed in a certain direction, make this film, make it this way, because he wasn't yet Tim Burton as we know him. This, however, was after he'd made Batman, won all that money, and then made his personal film, Edward Scissorhands. So he was not only given all the money, but he was given complete creative freedom. And after the film came out, Warner Brothers went, oh dear, what have we done? So the plot is... Batman's...
I feel like this is a theme with you, sorry. You like movies where studios have lost a lot of money on them.
Absolutely. Oh, no, I don't think they lost loads of money. It was still a big hit.
Yeah, it was a big hit. But they're like, what have you done? Why?
Exactly. I absolutely love... I love this sort of contrast between control and scrappiness and director getting to bust their way through the wall. And this very much is that case. And it's a Batman film where the director has very little interest in the title character. Instead, it concerns the Penguin. It chronicles his birth. He's got a hideous deformities, very similar to things like Freaks and The Elephant Man, clearly big influences on Burton. He's dumped into the sewer by his parents, and 30 years later, he re-emerges and gets the help of the major capitalist who isn't Bruce Wayne in Gotham. So this is kind of the anti-Bruce Wayne, guy called Max Schreck, named after the actor that played Nosferatu, very Tim Burton choice, to help him re-emerge and eventually to get a mayoral campaign going. At the same time, Catwoman, who at the time is Selena Kyle, is a lowly secretary. She's been changed from in the comics. She was a sort of a cat burglar type. And in this, she's a lower middle class, hates her job, but puts up with the abuse. And she also has a very linking to Max Schreck in that she works directly for him. And after she is caught in his office breaking into his personal files, he attempts to kill her, and that is the spurring desire to become Catwoman comes from that. And Batman, who cares? Tim Burton certainly doesn't.
I mean, how many bad guys does Tim Burton put in this movie?
Well, three, sorry. So there's Max Schreck, who is not a comic character, it's a completely new creation, and Penguin and Catwoman. And Batman is just sort of there.
I'd love to know how much actual time that Batman is on screen for.
I think he's in, for a 2-hour movie, I think he gets about 30 minutes of screen time.
I was going to say,
roughly.
I mean, if he's in the high 20s, that wouldn't surprise me,
And I love this movie for several reasons, and I am acknowledging its flaws, but I don't want to just kind of steamroll in and kind of just talk for 30 minutes. So can you please kind of give me your thoughts first before I sort of talk about what I dislike and what I like? Because there are things I dislike.
Yeah, it's all right.
You always do this.
It is a complete and utter mess. But quite likeable. I like all the individual performances. I'm not quite sure every performance is in the same movie. I love what Danny DeVito's doing, but I also have no idea what Danny DeVito's doing. He actually said this. Danny DeVito plays the Penguin, and it's a bit of a mess. Like, the Penguin story's a mess. The Penguin's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? The Penguin's like kind of modus operandi is a bit of a mess. At first he's
it switches about 3 or 4 times, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's trying to work out why his parents threw him away and find his parents, and then he wants Gotham to love him, and then he thinks he can be mayor, and then he kind of goes back to when he realizes he can't. On the 2 minutes Batman's on screen, he spoils their plan, and then they end up kind of everything falling apart. And then, I don't really know what his is. The one person that I thought had a really kind of clear understanding of their role was Max Schreck.
Max Schreck.
Because he's played by Christopher Walken. I am Max Schreck, and I only care about my son. I want to leave my business empire
Jeff,
to my son.
I want to give him my power industry. I want to give him that.
So his kind of only motivation is his son, which kind of actually works for him, because there is a scene towards the end of the film when Danny DeVito's character, after he switched the 7th time, his kind of modus operandi to going to be taking all the firstborns in Gotham and throwing them into the sewers out of petty vengeance, I think. Max Schreck gives himself up for his son's life because his son's his firstborn. Catwoman, I think hers makes sense. Actually, her character makes sense. And Michelle Pfeiffer, I think, does a good job of it. It almost feels like it could be 2 people. You can believe that. I mean, one of the big problems with Batman is always like, well, that's Bruce Wayne. Everyone knows that's Bruce Wayne. Even from just his mouth, you could tell a million miles off that's Bruce Wayne. But actually, I think Michelle Pfeiffer does a very good job of feeling like 2 very different people when she's the Cat and when she's Selina. So I think she does a good job. But it just doesn't really work. Everyone in Gotham's a bit of a set around, just some people to run around some giant rubber ducks. Why has the Penguin got loads of clowns working for him? That's the Joker's thing. And also, why is there lots of penguins there? And it also, it feels like, obviously, Tim Burton's gone, I've got $120 million or whatever ridiculous amount of money they gave him.
Do what I want.
But then he's also gone, well, actually, for what I want to do, I need $600 million. So I know, we'll just make an aquarium look like the Penguin's lair, and then there's penguins already there. And then but we can't afford giant penguins. So for the giant penguins, we'll just have people in suits. Really badly walking. That scene shocker, the bad guy dies. When they put when Penguin has died at the end, these just 4 Emperor Penguins come out, but they're not Emperor Penguins, they're people in suits, and just move his body into the water. And the way that happens is very strange. But overall, it's quite likeable. I kind of like all the bad guys. Don't really care that much about Batman. I mean, I could be made to care about Batman, but let's be honest, most superhero movies, when they're good ones, hint, hint, Marvel, the bad guy is good, and the bad guy is interesting and is the best bit of the movie. So from that point of view, it works. I love the set design. I think it's beautiful. The Danny Elfman score got on my nerves. It felt like I was watching Nightmare Before Christmas. I'm not going to lie. It's a bit too over the top and
very
flowery.
bombastic.
Yeah, it's a bit too much. But it doesn't, like, from a story point of view, it doesn't work. Like, none of the motives really work. Something will happen. Like, so most of it starts off. I couldn't really tell you what happened. Max Schreck wants a bit more power, so he decides he's going to an election, and for some reason he thinks the Penguin's going to be the person to win the election. And then he, after like one campaign speech, Batman changes the speech pattern to say something bad, which I think people already kind of realised about the Penguin character. And also the Penguin character is literally the most grotesque depiction of anything you've ever seen in your life. Like, very sexual harassing, like ridiculously sexual harassing. The way he eats, like, fish, just raw fish he's in front of all his campaign staff who are happily clapping, and he's just like rubbing raw fish on his face. Like, green keeps coming out of him. So I don't really kind of see how he's electable anyway. Having said that, Donald Trump did win an election, and he kind of ticks all those boxes. Apart from maybe I don't think I've seen green coming out of Donald Trump, but
not as far as we know.
No, but I have seen him throwing Big Macs into his mouth, and I haven't seen him sexually harassing, but there's enough people who've told me he sexually harasses. I'm fairly convinced he sexually harasses. So maybe there is something to it. But yeah, just like my little review there, a mess, but an enjoyable mess.
So I want to be upfront about the flaws as well, because it's, as we have mentioned, we're not interested in Batman. Tim Burton's not interested in Batman. I don't think he's ever been interested in Batman. But a bigger takeaway I get from this is I don't think Tim Burton, at least at this point, before he was the super mega super rich director, at this point he was only semi super rich. I don't think he's that trustful of the character of Batman. I think he sees him as a well-meaning goody who isn't actually all that effectual, because even when he does get involved in the action, he doesn't actually solve anything. I mean, the baddies die.
World's greatest detective.
Yeah, world's greatest detective.
Although, actually, the irony, the links between The Batman and Batman Returns that I saw.
Oh, I did want to sort of get to that. And but what it means is, this film is a mood piece rather than a super tight, structured plot, which it clearly isn't. And the mood is all around the Penguin and Catwoman. That's where Tim Burton's interest lies.
Yeah, basically, the mood is... What Tim Burton wanted to make was...
a Catwoman Penguin movie.
Well, no, I wasn't even going to say that. What Tim Burton wanted to make was Big Fish.
Well, I think what he wanted to make was a... So there's... the influences here are The Elephant Man, Todd Browning's Freaks, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein in Catwoman. He wants to make a 1930s monster movie, but no one gave him that money.
No.
And he sort of thinks, well, I've been given full creative control to make whatever I want. I may as well make my Universal monster film with this thing and just make whatever I want. So it means that the first 40 minutes have some of the best work in Tim Burton's career, because that's where a lot of the preamble of Catwoman and Penguin are setting up their motivations. And it's a very angry piece. I mean, because he's quite distrustful.
Yeah, the downtrodden kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's distrustful of the super rich, both in Shrek, who is actively evil, and in Bruce Wayne, who is attempting to do good, but is completely ineffectual and benign. And so when you take the film away from Batman, who is a rooftop dweller, he swoops down from the rooftops, you take it to the street level and you see just how poor the lives of the citizens of Gotham actually are. And in those first 40 minutes, there's some beauty in that. And I love those scenes. And there's anger in both Michelle Pfeiffer's performance and Danny DeVito's performance. You can hear Danny DeVito just growling, at random moments.
I know he's meant to be a penguin, but it is very animalistic.
Yeah, exactly. It's very primal. Both of their performances. Even when Selena Kyle, she's not yet Catwoman. There's a moment when she gets the taser for the first time, which will be included in her Catwoman weaponry. And her face just turns into a snarl, and she shocks the already unconscious bad guy. And then she goes back to Selena Kyle, go, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that kind of thing. But there's real beauty in that first 40 minutes. And then skip to 80 minutes. There's some real beauty in those last 40 minutes, pretty much as soon as the mayoral election plot is stopped, which stopped at about the maybe hour 10 mark. Because again, Tim Burton's not that interested in it.
It's a bit longer than that, I think, but yeah. But it's very abrupt.
Yeah, exactly. He wants rid of it.
Yes.
And in that, the kind of pretty much as soon as the climax starts, as soon as Batman foils the plan to kidnap the babies of Gotham and drown them, there's some great beauty in that, in Danny DeVito's performance again, when he's about to die and he comes out of the sewer and his nose is just streaming blood and his eyes are huge and he just green. Is, enwrapped. The rage is just his only motivation before he dies. And same with Michelle Pfeiffer in her wish for revenge against Max Schreck, who attempted to kill her. But not just that, is completely belittling her when she was Selena Kyle. So that first 40 minutes and that last 40 minutes are some of Tim Burton's best work. And the fact that it's sandwiched between Edward Scissorhands and Ed Wood is quite appropriate. Like, it could be a trifecta of his best stuff. But he knows eventually he has to make a Batman movie. That's what he's been hired to do. He's got to get to it. So around minute 40, fine, I'll put all of Michael Keaton's stuff here. And that's where all the plot happens. And it's the dullest part of the movie. There's some good scenes in there when he interacts with Michelle Pfeiffer, for example, because they have a romance. But none of that is interesting at all. None of his stuff, his foiling the plot or the mayoral election, that's
not really his plot.
No, it's not really his plot. But the plot, I mean, the kind of rather than the mood, the plot is all sandwiched into the middle 40 minutes, which is also where Michael Keaton is sandwiched. And that stuff, you can feel Tim Burton like, right, come on, oh God, 20 minutes, okay, I'm going to give you 20 minutes to do this plot, okay? And you can feel these rushing. So there are flaws there. The set is very beautiful, but because it's at a time when it's just sets, you can't expand it with like touches of CG. You can tell it's just a set because the fact that everything
it's set dressing, isn't it? They've gone into a warehouse and set dressed it, or they've gone
everything in Gotham is around this one little street, and everything in the Penguin's lair is around that one little lair. And
you mean around that one aquarium somewhere?
Exactly.
It even has, at one point, they have this scene with all the penguins. He's like addressing the penguins, and they're all just in the seating that clearly is the seating that's used for like the audience.
Yes, it is.
When like you go to watch the penguins at the aquarium. I don't know which aquarium it was at, but it was definitely at the aquarium.
No, absolutely. And so my main flaw is with that middle 40 minutes where it stops being a mood piece and starts being a plot. Because they have to get to it eventually. But the stuff where the mood happens, it is some of Tim Burton's best work, and it's probably his most politically angry. The fact that he's talking about these kind of, this is what happens when a superhero, it was before The Boys, before any of these kind of ironic takes on superheroes that we have now. This is kind of a director addressing, at least as much as he can within the system he's been given. Like, this is what happens when people are actually, their lives are messed up by a superhero being around. This is what happens. This kind of lifestyle is their lifestyle.
Which is kind of opposite of what the Nolan Batmans almost are, where it's like, look what the rich person can do.
Yes, exactly. And I never liked Christopher Nolan's super realistic take. I feel like there should be some melodrama there. There should be some...
What?
And
I remember you saying that, like, I remember you couldn't wait for the second one.
Oh, absolutely.
You loved it.
I mean, I was 18. Like, everybody was kind of getting in on it. Actually, no. It was probably... I think that film came out in 2008, so I would have been 18. So at the time, I was like, yes, Tim Burton, this is it. Chris Nolan. But now I have soured on the super realistic take somewhat. And I'm sort of slightly agnostic, especially about the final two films. And I like the goth melodrama kind of draping over everything. And I think this has Tim Burton's best scene in, which is the moment when Catwoman is born and she goes back to her apartment and she hears that answering machine message and she just goes absolutely bananas. And that's something that you can see. You can see the touches of Bride of Frankenstein, of Todd Browning's Freaks. That's a kind of perfect mini play of it. And I think that's the moments like that, those first and last 40 minutes where the mood all is why I kind of love it quite as much as I do. It's the bummer Christmas film that when I'm sick of joy, I want to see mood, and this is my mood.
Wow. Interesting. I have to. So a couple of bits, other bits I've thought about since that I liked about it is it actually does have a bit of a throwback to the Adam West stuff as well. There's a scene when I can't remember who it is who hands him the note. It's either one of the penguins or the monkey hands him a note from Batman, and which also kind of leads into this is how little Tim Burton cares about Batman, because you just get a bit bored of everyone screaming for this scene. Here, it just opens. He opens a bit of paper and pulls it out, and Batman's foiled his plot. And instead of showing Batman foiling his plot, it just says, "Children can't attend. Sorry, Batman," or something like that. And that's a very you could just see in an Adam West one, I don't know, a butler coming into the Joker and pulling the thing up and there being a bomb in it and it's saying, or being an envelope and it's saying bomb and then the envelope exploding or something like that.
It certainly isn't afraid of camp.
No, it definitely is over the top. And I quite like that. I think that's quite good fun. I don't know, it does feel, I still think where the hyperrealism's got a place is this kind of, to me, felt quite, and I actually don't think Batman Begins is that hyper-realistic. I think I quite like
that's the best. That's my favourite of the three because of that reason.
I think that blends it enough. I think this at times does feel a bit of a mess, and it does feel like, well, why is he going round in a giant rubber duck? Why has that rubber duck got wheels with like a weird vroom, vroom, vroom,
like a Mario Kart?
Yeah, like you could have sped it up like doom, doom, doom. I think it actually was sped up because it's so slow. And then just the way, I don't know, it did take me out of it at times, and I don't really think I cared about any of the characters, which is kind of, I feel when you're saying, oh, it's this mood piece and you're meant to really care about these villains and feel sorry for them and I kind of feel like I don't, because it takes me out of it too much. I think
even Catwoman.
She's probably the most. She's the one that I can see the most humanity in and kind of understand the character, and I think Michelle Pfeiffer is by far
I think it's her best performance.
Yeah, I do. I think she's actually very good in it. Michael Keaton's fine when he's on screen. I actually always thought that Michael Keaton's a pretty good Batman.
There's a sarcastic quality to his Batman, which I like.
I think it works for Bruce.
Yeah.
And Danny DeVito. I mean, I don't know what the direction Danny DeVito has been. If it's literally, can you be the grossest, most disgusting thing you've ever been in your life, even more than Frank from Always Sunny, then, he's ticked that box really well. I mean, I don't understand what the costume he's wearing is. I don't understand where all this green's coming from. I suppose. So I suppose if actually what you want is a penguin that really looks and acts like a penguin, he did a very good job at it. But I do. I like the. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't like the film. I've always liked the film. I've always thought it's quite good fun and it's ridiculous and it's silly. But I think if I have to actually review it as a movie reviewer, I would say it's incredibly deeply flawed and a massive mess. Mm-hmm. And I think
that's fair. That's fair. I think I just was won over more by Tim Burton's attempt at the melodrama that he's spinning is what I'm buying. And I know that as much as I want some films to be cult films, like the mentioned Speed Racer, which is a cult film only to me and no one else. This so it recently had its 30-year anniversary, and when it did, there were articles in The Guardian, in The Times, of people talking about it. And one of the things they mentioned is that when superhero movies are often chaste, this is very sexual. Mm. When they're often bloodless, this is very violent, and streams of blood and green. But even when he bites that guy's nose,
oh yeah, that's bloody.
It goes for it, and it's a big swing. And I think this is, you mentioned before, like you like these films that are the director's attempting to kind of burst away from the studio and make a mess, but only a mess that's personal to him. And I say, yeah, I do, because I like seeing someone take a big swing, even if the ball doesn't get hit.
Yeah, and next week we're going to be listening to Callum's 10 out of 10 review of Tideland Tales.
Tideland Tales?
Isn't that the one that Richard Kelly did his second movie?
Oh, Southland Tales.
Southland Tales.
Yeah. Well,
even that is too bad for Callum.
Even that's too incoherent, even for me. There'll be 10 out of 10s for Speed Racer, The Last Jedi, Batman Returns. There won't be for Tideland. You've got me saying it. Southland Tales.
Isn't Tideland
Tideland is
the
Terry Gilliam
film with
I think that's his incoherent personal mess of a film.
Yeah, but it's quite. A lot of people really rate it. I quite like it. Yeah, it is weird though. That I like the fact that they were talking about it on someone's podcast the other day, talking about it with what's his name, Big Lebowski.
Oh, Jeff Bridges.
With Jeff Bridges. Jeff Bridges, like, it was the weirdest film I ever had to do because I just played a dead guy for the whole movie. But yeah.
But I guess maybe I should summarise this film before we get too far off.
Well, quite.
So,
well, not summarise. Give us your out of 10.
Okay, so out of 10, I think I will give this, because it's a personal thing, and I understand there are flaws in it, but I will give it a 9 out of 10.
Wow.
I think it's understandable why this film has the cult fan base that the first Batman film, though it's more successful. You know, people don't talk about that film anymore. They don't talk about the first Tim Burton Batman film, as this gets the big 30-year anniversary, and every Halloween there's people dressing up like Catwoman. It's become the quintessential look for Catwoman. Mm-hmm. It hits people, for the people that it hits them. And for me, I am one of those people. And I think for that kind of personal angst that the film is spinning, I'm buying it. And so 9 out of 10 for me for this one.
I completely understand why it's become a cult movie. It's definitely got all the hallmarks of a cult movie. I also think people, and I'm with them, kind of miss the Tim Burton Batmans, and I think it's a bit of a shame that he didn't do 3 and 4.
Yeah.
I think obviously, well, I don't want to be mean about Joel Schumacher because he's dead, but I don't like those 2 movies in any way.
I think that's
Val Kilmer's
miscast,
and George Clooney was miscast, as much as I love George, and they're just messes. And I don't think they tried to do the camp, but without the dark. And I won't say Tim Burton got the balance right, but he got the balance. Well, actually, in fairness, in Batman, I think he did get the balance right. But yeah, in Batman Returns, he got it pretty close as well. So it works on that level. There's some good acting in there. The sets are cool. And obviously, we have to think it is a 30-odd movie, so you've got to give it a bit of rope. But I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because I think that's probably the correct film scory one. So between us, that is an 8 out of 10. So that's a should watch dunk stamp.
Yes.
And then Callum, so what will you give Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence?
I think for the reason of it being personal and human and telling a very difficult story in a way that gets down to individual personage and shows you kind of the day-to-day lives, and for having that beautiful performance by David Bowie and the rest of the cast, all doing probably some of their best work, and for the musicians who are acting for the first time, or in David Bowie's case, for the second or third time, it shows you just how sensitively they take their musicianship and apply it to being an actor. I think it's an easy 8 out of 10, even despite those, and they really are nitpicks. Despite those nitpicks, an 8 out of 10, it's a very beautiful story.
So I think it's got, I do think the editing really pulls it back a bit. I do think it's not that I think films should be easy to get into, but I don't think it's necessarily an easy film, and it doesn't feel, say, as smooth as something like The Killing Fields. I mean, The Killing Fields I would probably give 10 out of 10. Like, it's one of, it's a top 50 movie, one of my favourite movies kind of thing. But again, I think for exactly all the reasons you've said, I think it is very well acted. I think it is very human. I think the score's amazing. I think there are touches of genius in there, and again, giving a little bit of rope for how long ago it was made and the time it was made. I would probably also give it an 8 out of 10. Interesting enough. So that is another 8 out of 10 between us for that movie. So both of these movies, if you want a bit of an alternative Christmas watch, they have got the Callum and Johnny seal of approval.
You'll have a very bad mood afterwards, but you'll have a fun time.
Yeah, well, I don't know if fun's the word, but probably watching Batman more.
Yeah.
And on that cheery note, have a Merry Christmas.
Have a lovely Christmas.
And goodbye from us.
Bye.
Don't do that. James fucking Corden. Fuck that guy.